If you would have asked me some years ago what living a set-apart life looked like, I would just assume that it was giving God time just to set it aside for devotion. But as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that living a set-apart life is the devotion. It is more than just setting aside time for God, but it is a daily worship. And a daily worship, not in the aspect of just like us physically worshiping, but I've been realizing that I am the worship. I am the sacrifice. So as of late, I have been redefining what living a surrender life looks like for me. There was a time that I would literally live life according to whatever I wanted to do, meaning anything that would please my flesh. I would live a contradictive life, so much so that even that was a battle within myself, because how I was living a lot of times was contrary to what I actually believed. And in this season, God has really been calling me, not just halfway, but fully and 100% calling all of me to surrender to Him and His will. And so while that hasn't been something easy, it has been something that's been challenging. And I wanted to lean in on that and just think about kind of how far I've come from where I used to be a few years ago and up until this point of what it really means to live a surrender and set apart life. To be honest, if anyone was to tell me that God was going to call me to the point of living my life 100% completely sold out for Him, to be honest, I probably laughed in your face and thought, of course not me. But because who God is, of course, when you think you wouldn't do something a certain way, of course, He would be the one to bring you to that season. As I've been getting through some dark seasons and I'm now kind of coming on the other side, I have definitely been looking at my Christian walk in a different way. And I've come to realize that there is only one way that God is going to allow me to live my life, and that is 100% completely surrendered to His will. So as I've been going through this season and this journey and literally surrendering to God's will, I've been reframing how I think about what it means to live a set-apart life. So when you hear about people saying that they were called to live a set-apart life, it sounds like something that people who were called to big things, big positions, big platforms, were the ones that God was selecting to live a set-apart life. But I realized that in this season, God is calling us all to live a life that's set apart. Now, for me, living a set-apart life, I used to always think about it from the lens of Romans 12, of it saying, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. But as of late, I've been looking at texts that really exemplifies the fullness of what it means to be set apart and why we were even called to that. And when I went on that journey of finding that text that really stood out for me and exemplifies what it means for me to live a set-apart life, it brought me to a text in the Message Bible in 1 Peter chapter 2, 9 through 10. But you are the ones chosen by God, chosen for the high calling of priestly works, chosen to be a holy people, God's instruments to do His work and to speak out for Him, to tell others of the night and day differences He made for you, from nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. One perspective that I've been leaning in on when it comes to being a chosen one is that Christ first chose us before we ever chose Him. Not only does that come with a weight, but it comes with a responsibility. Living a set-apart life is not easy. It does come with a cost. It is weighty. However, if God has called us to a season where He requires all of us, then He knew beforehand what it would cost, and it meant that He wanted to journey along this season with us. I'll admit it was very hard to get to the point of wanting to do things God's way. For so long, I was used to doing things the way that I wanted, what pleased my flesh, whatever I craved for. When I used to hear living a set-apart life, it always seemed like something very difficult, something that felt very unattainable. But in this season, God has been journeying me through a process of wanting me 100% and completely. He wanted all my heart. And in a season where God is requiring all of you, it is not easy. It does require a lot from you. It is very costly and it is very uncomfortable. However, I had to come to terms that if God called me to it, then it meant that He was going to be right there through the seasons with me. And I also had to come to terms that if God was calling me to a season of surrender, where it meant that I was surrendering all of myself, I also had to come to a new term to realize that this is just the start of a journey that's going to be ongoing, because the moment that God calls us to surrender to all of Him, to give Him all of who we are, it is literally a continuous journey. It doesn't stop there. It just means that from here on out, things may get more uncomfortable. Things might get more challenging. We might have to face more obstacles. We might have to go through more suffering. But it really does mean that even though we come to those seasons in life, it means that He's going to be there throughout all of those seasons with us. And it made me think about all the times that I felt rejected, and how because of God choosing me to live a set apart life, I'm automatically accepted, even if in other spaces I might have counted myself out. Even if I count myself out today, God has chose to accept us to live a set apart life. And think about it from the weight of being chosen for a high calling. It doesn't matter how big or how small the platform is that we have. It doesn't matter if we're called to something big or if we're called to smaller things. The purpose that God has created us to be on this earth for, especially if He called us to live lives set apart, is all for a reason. And even though it might seem small to us, it's something big to God. And so I have started looking at God choosing me to live a set apart life as a big purpose. A lot of times we can look at the space and what we're in and what we're doing, and we can look at it as something very small, and we forget to think that God has chosen us to be a part of a bigger plan. And living a set apart life is God's bigger plan. It's so that people can see the face of Jesus through us. So living life set apart no longer became something that I wanted to view as just challenging. Although it is challenging and although it is uncomfortable, I no longer want to look at it as the challenge that I have to face and go through, but I want to look at it from the perspective as it is the reasonable thing that I can do. It is the least that I can do. It's a small part that I can play in God's bigger plan and bigger design, that maybe someone who also is being called to a life of being set apart by God, that they can also see that it's worth it as well. And although there's been so many times throughout my back and forth journey with Christ, although I have not always viewed my Christian walk as something that is worth journeying through, I no longer look at living a set apart life as something that's just an obstacle that's so hard and difficult. But I look at it as an opportunity that God chose me to be able to journey through this life with Him. And again, it will be some ups, it will be some downs. I want to encourage you that if God is calling you to a season to be completely and 100% surrendered to Him, that let go of the concept of it being difficult and hard and uncomfortable and journey through that space with Him.